Gone down to 28-22. He's lost 4 games, and as we can see as well, Liem scores better on fighting chess. So I think with the white pieces, he has a decent chance now to hit back in this quarterfinal.
Fantastic. Liem, one of the players with the highest fighting chess index score, and that means with the white pieces. And he is down by 1 point. He will come out fighting in this game. What do you expect, David?
I'm not sure exactly what opening to expect, but for sure, Liem loves his fighting chess, and he does serve with both hands. He plays different types of openings. He did a chessable course last year, I think on 1d4, as we see.
Yeah, on the London system.
Exactly, and the London system. He doesn't go for that this time, though. We see the Queen's Gambit, and the Gambit has been accepted. Something we've rarely seen on the tour, actually, but a very solid opening from Magnus Carlsen. And he's used this with success so far in this tournament in the Airthings Masters Magnus. And some quick moves there. White is the first to castle. And now this last move by White. A bit of a strange one, a bit of a rare one, just bringing the White Knight out in this manner. Either way, Magnus maybe just going into solid mode now that he has a lead in this mini-match. What do you think, guys? Good opening choice from either side? Or
yeah,
too early to tell?
I know in this system, White can often exchange the queens off, but we've talked about the ending, and I think Magnus will be very comfortable if the queens come off the board. So this last move, you mentioned it's peculiar, but I'm hoping that White is going to sacrifice a pawn here by pushing the other pawn in the middle up 2 squares, just saying, have a pawn, I need to win, I'm going to take some risks. And I think this move at least blocks the queens, so we won't see a queen exchange, which I think Liem Quang has to go for. He has to keep the queens on the board. He needs to win this game. If he doesn't win this game, it's going to be really, really tough. So an interesting move there.
Yeah, and the main reason you mentioned that the knight has has kind of parked itself in front of the white queen, in front of the white bishop, is because if black just develops a very normal move, very standard move, then this pawn sacrifice. We would see fireworks if this happens, Simon. Black winning a pawn in the centre, but white gaining space, gaining time now against the black knight. And this pawn on this square, the e5 square, often acts as a launch pad for white's attack later. The white pieces could use central squares now to go for the black king if it goes to the side of the board.
And I just had it confirmed. It was my spider senses were tingling, and I was like, I know this position. And it's because it's part of Sam Shankland's chessable course.
Okay.
So I was like, haven't I been doing the move trainer on this?
You've been exactly practicing.
Exactly.
Nice.
And yeah, I was like, unusual. It was an unusual choice. It's not mainstream, this.
Yeah, that's very interesting because Sam is really famous for his theoretical knowledge, and obviously his chessable course is one of the highest rated courses out there. Does Magnus know this course though? Because he's thinking about it. I mean, he should know it, but it's yeah, what an interesting move.
Yeah, he should know, but I doubt Magnus does. Magnus, of course, watches a lot of chessable stuff himself. He's very, very knowledgeable about all sorts of openings. And also, he used to work with Sam Shankland, remember? Sam helped him in the 2016 World Championship match. But then again, this is quite a rare move, and it's not Magnus's main opening from the black pieces. Magnus has been playing a few different things lately, both against 1e4 and 1d4. And this is not Magnus's main line. So against a very rare sideline like this, I wouldn't be surprised if he's surprised. And Liem, meanwhile, fighting chess. And look at that stance, kind of crossing his arms, just looking like a boss there. I like this last move. And yeah, also Liem now living in the US, coaching in the US, he will be very aware of ideas from players such as Sam Shankland.
Okay. Well, game 2 for Kaimer Nepomniachtchi has also started. They played a draw in the first game. Artemiev Ding, game 2 has started. Ding won the first game, is up by 1 point. Hansen and Esipenko, game 2 will start shortly. That was looking good for Esipenko the entire game, but it ended in a draw. So Hansen must have played some fantastic defensive moves there to save that draw, and he will have the white pieces in the upcoming game. Bunch of moves. Wow.
Yeah, a bunch of moves. And maybe I was wrong. Maybe Magnus wasn't surprised. He took a while, but he did eventually come up with a flurry of quick moves. And we saw a trade of a set of pawns in the centre of the board. Black's dark squared bishop came out and actually traded itself off for a knight. But look at the pawn structure now. In the middle of the board, white has an isolated pawn. We call it an IQP, an isolated queen's pawn. And it can be very strong. It controls lots of squares, but it can also be a weakness long term. And actually, it can even be captured right now by the black queen. Black's queen can come down and take a pawn, but that would lose a lot of time. The black queen will get kicked around the board, and the fact that Liem's played so quickly up to this point means he's for sure still in his homework. I would be too scared to capture that pawn, I must admit. I would try and get black's pieces out as quickly as possible. Look at them, they're all still asleep. They need to develop.
There's a nasty trick. If black does capture the pawn here, I assume white can start swinging. I'm using that term, swinging again. Don't know why. Don't ask me. Swinging it into action, and he can bring it to this square next to the queen, maybe c4, I'm thinking. And this has a really nasty little threat. So let's say black pushes or tries to push that knight away by using the b pawn. Well, hang on a minute. There's a common idea here. Black now loses his queen to a nasty discovered check. This is another little tactic. We talked about pins earlier. This is a discovery. You can also call it an ambush. You ambush the queen and you win the queen there. So I wouldn't be touching that pawn there if I was Magnus. And Magnus, this is just the position you want against Magnus because, again, it was mentioned when the queens are off, Magnus is phenomenal. The way you beat him, you keep the queens on, you get the initiative, you go for the attack. It's the only chance, really, I think, of taking him down. And Liem Quang's got the position he would dream of before this game started. So great opening choice, definitely.
Yeah.
Fully agreed.
Yeah.
This position is full of life, and that's exactly what Liem needs in order to fight back.
And if there's one tiny weakness that we've seen in Magnus's armour, it's that at times he can be a little bit negligent about king safety. You know, we've seen him get checkmated. And especially I'm thinking back to the 2021 season. And, well, we're quite happy here because Magnus decided not to take that, we thought, poison pawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we rewind 14 months to the Airthings Masters on last season against Daniel Dubov, he got checkmated. I think it was 3 times in their mini-match over the 2 days. He's been checkmated a few times by Wesley So. Yeah, it's all about king safety. And if you look at white's bishops here, they both point in the general direction of the black king. So the kind of outline of an attack exists, but Magnus will be hoping that he can get organised before that attack really starts to take shape. This last bishop move, I kind of like it, but I don't know, something instinctively, it feels a bit slow.
I mean, what about this knight trying to move into that juicy square in the centre of the board? I mean, with tempo, that's the first move that springs to mind. Get the knight active, use that activity. And, you know, when you have the initiative, as white has a slight initiative here, you've got to play as actively as you can and bringing the knight in, start creating some threats, start probing black's kingside here. And, you know, I don't think Magnus will be comfortable in this position.
Yeah, I guess his idea is to plant his bishop on the long diagonal and just hope that he'll get some counterplay later on this diagonal against the white king. Yes, the white knight can jump in, protected by this bishop, to attack a rook, but after the rook moves, maybe there's no follow-through. It looks beautiful for white, especially this knight is going to be a real thorn in black's side, but maybe there's no follow-up immediately. So, yeah, I mean, plenty of options in the current position as well. I mean, this looks so tempting, Simon. Actually, he does play it. I was going to say there are options of maybe bringing the white queen across, trying to swing it towards the black king. But first, he brings his knight in, and the bishop does indeed park itself on this square. Oof, it looks so scary for black. Yeah. I mean, this bishop's just cutting the board in half in a way.
Yeah, maybe the knight can also just come into the centre.
Exactly, start looking at some of those squares around the black king.
I'm not so keen on this one, though. Black can now threaten checkmate. Black can hit this pawn with this queen.
Whoops, yeah. I mean, you get the 2 bishops, but that's not so great here. So,
I mean, yeah, I don't think white wants to spend so many moves with this knight over the last few turns just to capture this bishop and allow black's knights out. Suddenly, black is very active and this pawn very, very weak. So, OK, instead, white just brings his rook to the side. OK, he, I guess, wants to meet this queen move by just stepping back with his knight, attacking the queen and also defending this key pawn in front of the white king. But maybe not the most energetic move, this last one, by white, just bringing the rook across. Maybe there was something even better, I'm not sure. And, OK, Magnus still under some pressure, though, in order to fight back in this game, and especially this black knight needs to get out at some point.
And we've got to remember, Liem Quang was actually Blitz world champion. So he's, as well as, you know, being a class player, he's very good at Blitz. He's not, you know, not a spectator in this competition. But I don't know, this last move, as you mentioned, what's it actually doing? And you've got to always play with a purpose. I mean, it's an obvious move. You move the rook to a half-open file, but does it actually threaten anything? I can't see a threat here. I mean...
Maybe he wants to lift that rook up the board and swing it across.
Yes. He's getting in the swing of it.
It's a swing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's as you say, Simon. Sometimes in rapid chess, especially, you just find the hand playing automatic moves, which just look good, which slightly improve your position, but don't actually have a purpose or a plan necessarily. This feels like that type of move, but then again, if Magnus isn't able to get active himself, then White will have, for sure, ideas with this white rook. So, yeah, it feels like the next 3 or 4 moves are going to be really critical.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. I mean, one thing that I do have some experience playing against this pawn, this isolated queen's pawn, as we call it. And one of the things that I found is that you have to tread very carefully. You have to use a lot of energy, just neutralizing White's dynamism with the pieces. And once you've done that, then you can kind of maybe enjoy the fruits of your labour around about move 40 or something when you've gone into an endgame. But for rapid chess, this is like the perfect opening for White.
Yeah, you have to get to move 40, and again, it's one of those typical structures where if you're playing chess, we talked about this earlier, you might know the opening, but you should always be thinking, what kind of middle game position do I like playing? And famously, like Karpov used to like playing the black side of these positions. He used to like playing against the isolated pawn, but then there are other players, and I expect Kasparov, like playing with the isolated pawn. So it does come down to personal choice quite a lot, and what suits your style of play. And you've got to bear that in mind when you're picking openings. I think you've got to pick openings which you enjoy playing. There's no point playing a position where you might be better, but you're not really enjoying it. You don't really want to, find the best moves, because you won't find the best moves. So, but this suits certainly Liem Quang's style of play. So,
You mentioned that, Simon. Actually, when I was young, all of my openings were geared towards this exact pawn structure with White. I always wanted the isolated pawn.
Dave, I know I lost so many times to you in these. I know. You've always got these positions against me, and I'm sure, and I always struggled. So
I was about to say, though, the older I get, the more I want to be on the black side against the isolated pawn, because White's position takes energy, and I don't have the energy these days. When I was young, I would use the isolated pawn.
When you were young, hang on a minute.
When I was younger.
Hang on a minute.
Sorry.
How old are you, David?
I can't even remember.
29.
29?
I wish.
Yeah.
31.
Always
31.
29.
You're still a spring chicken, definitely. So.
Okay, when I was a teenager, when I was still kind of learning my steps in the game, I would always use this pawn structure as an attack, as a way to attack the black king. But then these days I believe more in defence, and I just love just locking things down, as Magnus is trying to do, planting the bishop in front of the isolated pawn, just hoping that there won't be an attack, and then long-term trying to utilise the superior structure, the pawn structure that black has.
It's a very strange idea here. You can move that knight into the centre and do the same rook move you played. Can that knight jump towards the king? I mean, that's the kind of... you look at the black king, you're trying to attack it, let's move our pieces towards that king. Very brutal chess, so maybe we can just show that. The knight attacks the rook. If the rook just slips up and comes forwards, then maybe the knight moves again. I don't know if this achieves anything. It might not, but you're getting nearer that king. Are there any threats here? You probably, as White, need to get your queen into this position. If your queen could fly out, this could be terminal, but maybe black's okay here.
Yeah, and the trick is that if the knight gets captured, then the bishop can now pounce and capture the black rook. And yes, you've given up a knight as White, but now your bishop is protected by your own rook. So very, very sneaky tactic. As you mentioned, Simon, the key question would be whether White has a follow-through if the black rook just moves again and retreats. Does White's knight also have to take a step back? I mean, it would be very tempting to look at sacrifices here. Knight takes pawn, opening up the black king, then trying to get the white queen in. For example, whiz it towards the black king, but maybe it's not quite enough. You only have a couple of attackers, and black does have a very strong defender in this knight.
This is the kind of sacrifice I would do, then I'd probably resign 3 moves later. This is a kind of
Move first, think later, yeah.
Wow, very optimistic sacrifice. And, as you get older, you realise you have to have more pieces in the attack before these things work. But it's an idea that obviously is hanging in the position. If White can get another piece, and maybe with your idea, Ivanka, of bringing the rook in, possibly here.
Bring the rook in, step the queen up onto the dark squares. I mean, I think you've got to build it. You can't get too enthusiastic at the beginning. And talking about enjoyment, Simon, I'm sure you'll appreciate this tweet from Valentino, who says, it's a little known fact, chess and fishing was written prior to 1897. before the blitz and bullets existed, as there was much more time between moves to deal with a live fish on the line.
I thought you were being serious there. I was like, really? I've been tricked here? Where is that book? I need a copy. So it seems like it goes perfectly. A bit of fishing, get the chessboard out.
Exactly.
Chill out.
Exactly.
You know,
Well, especially nowadays with your phone, you can have like a chess app.
Yeah.
Fishing. Yeah.
And there's a reason why, you know,
That's a good day.
the top engines are like stock fish.
Yeah.
And little fish. We've got little fish. Yeah, you know.
True.
There's like history there.
Yeah.
And we also have an interesting question from Charlie Hill, who asks us, Magnus is such a strong player, but following his defeat against Pragnanda, do you think his opponents will have more confidence in being able to push for a win against Magnus?
I mean, I guess whenever you're playing Magnus, no matter if he's lost a game, he's the world champion. You're going to have a little bit of fear because he's the best player in the world. It might give them more confidence. It should certainly give Prag more confidence, as he said in the interview, that once you've beaten someone once, you feel a lot better when you play them again. I mean, again, I haven't overcome that with David, but in the past, I remember other rivals of mine, I'd have a terrible score, and you get one win against them, and your confidence builds, you play better, and then it works out. You can win a lot of games in a row after that. So it is a confidence thing, chess. Often, just having that confidence to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Mental game, right? So
yeah, on that subject, for a long time, I was Simon's what we call customer. He would just play anything, and he would just beat me. And then one time, I beat him.
best feeling.
Can't remember that. It might have happened. I don't know. Doubtful.
And then after that, I was like, he struggled a little bit against me.
Last time we played, you crushed me on about move 20, and my king ended up. Oh, it was painful. So yeah, it was.
That wasn't the last time.
Was it? Oh no, the last time was even worse. Well, I managed to draw, but I was, let's say, winning quite well.
Yeah,
so
it was a bit of a miracle.
Thank you for bringing back those memories, Jovanka. Just yeah.
Well, what does Simon and Pragnananda have in common?
Oh dear.
Both beat Magnus during the Airthings
right.
Masters.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. Over there. Yeah.
To build your confidence again.
That's better. Yeah. So. Yeah.
All right. Well.
No fish here. It's just two sharks playing the game and fighting it out. There have been a few moves in the meantime. White's knight has gone on an adventure, but not towards the black king. White's knight has gone off to the queen side instead. It was attacking a black rook, but meanwhile, white has centralized a rook. Black's queen not entirely safe on the square she stands on, eyed up indirectly by white's rook on the bottom of the board there. Check out that tension later between the white rook and the black queen. Meanwhile, Liem just taking a timeout. We've seen this time and time again by the top players. When in doubt, just push a pawn, normally this pawn in front of your king, to give it some breathing space. And it's really tense in the middle of the board, actually, right now. I don't see how black breaks that tension, though. White's dark squared bishop and that white knight cemented on nice squares. The question is, for both sides, what next? And black needs to improve his rooks. White needs to maybe get the queen into the action. And yes, the evaluation bar's gone down. It used to be loving white's position, but still a lot of problems for black to solve.
And game 2 between Keimer and Nepomniachtchi has ended in a draw, so they are still tied, both games ending up in draws. Game 3 will start in about 10 minutes, I think. A quick draw, this game 2 between these two. All right, another move.
Another move, and black does deal with the first issue I mentioned there. The black rooks need to improve. The problem is both black rooks kind of want to use this one square, and black now has one decent rook, and look how it's opposite the white queen. Again, just a general pattern to remember. Planting your rook opposite the enemy queen can be a nice way to annoy your opponent.
Could black, I know it's a bit of an outrageous idea here, because the one advantage black has is, in isolated pawn positions, black has the better pawn structure, because the white pawn can be weak in the ending, and black would love to swap off loads of pieces and start hitting that white pawn in the middle of the board, because none of black's pawns are weak. But could black be trying to play his pawn to e5, pushing that forwards, maybe, okay, to open up a rook towards the white queen? I mean, it looks like the wrong thing to do, but if you're really desperate to get some activity, it's maybe an idea.
Yeah, it's maybe even more tempting now that white's queen is still on a square opposite one of the black rooks. And pushing this pawn forward, as you say, it does allow white to trade off one of his long-term weaknesses. But if you take now, then it gets really messy. Black actually has a choice. You can take with the black rook and hit the white queen afterwards, or you can take with the black knight. And, I mean, whose queen is under more threat here? I don't know. The black rook trying to get through to the white queen, whereas the white rook trying to break through to the black queen. There are pieces in the way. Both sides could throw pieces out of the way now to try and create those attacks. But, yeah, just one big mess. Personally, I would be reluctant unless Magnus is 100% sure that this gives him something immediately. But then again, maybe it does. So really interesting move here by Simon. As you say, counterintuitive maybe, or going against the rules. But black's pieces, then again, they are nicely centralized. The black knights on their perfect squares, the black rooks also on their perfect squares. So maybe now is the moment, rather than sit passively, to break out in the center and push the pawn. Wow. I don't see any downsides to it yet.
Yeah. I remember one thing you said yesterday about the way Magnus plays, and he doesn't like playing these moves, really. I mean, he prefers to keep it positionally sound and only play a move like that if it really does work, and he hasn't played it here. He's got a great deal of patience, and I suppose he's just trying to activate his queen now on the king side. Makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah, partly attacking this pawn with the knight now and the queen, but also maybe, as you mentioned, going towards the white king. And OK, that does make Liem a bit uncomfortable, and a queen trade is happening. Who's got the best endgame technique? We're going to find out, because after queen takes queen, white now does have the opportunity of playing pawn takes. And OK, he takes with the rook instead. I was going to say teaming up with his pawns. No more isolated pawns. These pawns are connected. But then again, black could maybe blockade in the center of the board and try and trade some pieces. So rook takes, I must admit, I'm surprised by that one, though.
I'm really surprised by that one, because my understanding of all this is that if white were to get two connected pawns, then they would be slightly better. So I've always avoided trading any pieces on that particular E3 square.
Yeah, you always want to improve your pawn structure if you can. I mean, that's just something you do, especially as you're getting nearer the ending where the queens come off, and taking with a pawn would have improved white's pawn structure, because the isolated pawn is not an isolated pawn. So he's sacrificing that for piece activity. He's still got two bishops, so it should be OK here for white. But the queen exchange must help Magnus.
Yeah, I'm surprised the evaluation bar's still on white's side, actually, because now after this knight retreat, again, just allowing some trades, this doesn't really favour white in any way. It does feel like black is the one who has specific ideas in mind. Maybe the black bishop will just drop back and then a knight could occupy this square. That's the normal rule. If your opponent has an isolated pawn like this, the best blockaders are knights. Black's bishop looks good, but if you can replace it with a knight, that's even better. Also, the black knight can jump out this way, attack the white rook. Plenty of ideas here. I think white is the one who needs to be energetic and accurate, and I don't really see the plan, to be honest. Black's bishop just defends everything, and if you ever trade it off, it does indeed get replaced by one of the black knights. And normally bishops are better. Normally you prefer having two bishops rather than two knights, but here the bishops don't really have any targets. Black's knights are the ones which won't be dislodged from these fantastic central squares.
I do have one vague idea, and it's just based on the whole concept that when you do have this isolated pawn in the middle of the board, your position tends to be OK in an endgame if you control the open line. So in this case, it would be the C line. And so I'm thinking, well, the white knight is like perfectly placed for that. So maybe try to initiate some trades to stop the bishop going back. Well.
So, for example, taking this knight and black can never challenge for this file.
Yeah.
Possibly. But then I guess it's hard to do anything with this file. And yeah. I mean, I like your idea. I probably would have been tempted to take as well, but instead Liem showing patience himself this time and just dropping back with his rook. So maybe he still has this idea in mind to take this knight, and then he wants to lift this rook up the board, not to swing it across this time, but just to double up his rooks on the only open file, the C file. And OK, very, very tense. But we're in the endgame now, and it's all about technique, all about general understanding.
Well, Magnus is up by 1 point. There is a new format this season, so quarterfinal matches and semi-final matches are decided on one day. Last year it was 2 days to decide the matches, but this year only 1 day to decide the quarterfinal matches. And well, Magnus talked about it in the interview yesterday. He thinks that favors him a little bit, right? Because he did struggle in quite a lot of on the day 2 matches, basically.
Yeah, it's strange because normally Magnus, at least historically, is a slow starter. But I guess just having this one day, these 4 games to throw every ounce of energy into, it's just easier for him. Maybe especially after suffering with COVID, maybe just the remaining energy he has, or as he builds up his strength again, just throwing his energy in. It's more of a sprint now than a long distance run, at least, and maybe, that will suit him.
Yeah, so that does mean, everyone, that if matches are tied after 4 games, then we do head straight to tie breaks, and odds are definitely that we will have some blitz chess today because, well, Keimer and Nepomniachtchi, they are tied after 2 games, and Hansen and Nesipenko, they drew the first game, and let's see what happens in game 2 between those two. Well, in this one, the bar is always sort of slightly liking Liem's situation a little bit better.
Yeah, again, I'm surprised it is, because I think Magnus is just playing very, very solid moves. And now, Jovanka mentioned this white knight just stopping black accessing the c-file with the black rooks. With a potential knight trade, black's rooks would get access to that file.
Yeah, well, one thing I've noticed with computers, I mean, I don't always trust their judgment, and in isolated pawn positions, they always like having the isolated pawn. And I don't think they often realise the long-term problems that, for example, white has with this pawn. Magnus is doing everything right. The more exchanges, the weaker that pawn becomes, and I think it's going Magnus's way because he's exchanging. Yes, white has 2 bishops. Yes, white is not worse, but I think Magnus is now comfortable, at least here, with a nice hold in the centre of the board. And again, going back to Boris Spassky, he mentioned that it wasn't the isolated pawn which is the weakness, it's the square in front of the isolated pawn which is actually the real weakness. And you can see the bishop, black's bishop, in the middle of the board, it can't be kicked away by a pawn, even though it's just moved. So, so black certainly has control of some nice squares in the middle here.
Yeah, actually, you're completely right. I've analysed so many isolated queen's pawn positions with computers, and they always overestimate white's chances. Yeah. Often they say white has a +1 advantage, but then they just want to move their rook back and forth, and do nothing. Also, the computers do slightly overestimate the bishop pair sometimes as well. I think some computers are even programmed to say bishops, when they're as a pair, are worth 3.5 or 3.25 each, whereas a knight is worth 3. And small adjustments like that might explain why the evaluation bar prefers white. But look at the black knight now. It's never getting kicked away. This position, very, very healthy for black. And as you say, Simon, white's not worse, but he's definitely not better anymore either.
No. I mean, it's maybe equal, but I mean, I'm just thinking if I was white here, I'd be trying to look at my pawns now because black's got such good control, and I'd be trying to push my kingside pawns. But black is so solid now in the centre, and I just think Magnus is fine here at the moment, at least.
I think Liem is probably just playing for a draw. I think he's quite happy with that.
Yeah, I don't think there's many winning chances left. If Magnus had actually left that knight in the centre of the board, Liem would have captured it and the game would have fizzled out. We saw opposite colour bishops in Vincent Keimer against Jan Nepomniachtchi. That ended in a draw, and if the white light-squared bishop had traded off for a knight, we would have seen opposite colour bishops again. That's why Magnus retreated his knight. Maybe he senses some small chances of winning this game as black. That's the only reason I can justify that knight retreat. But I was about to say white can continue chasing that knight, and now bishop takes knight, or the bishop going back where it came from, both of those moves are going to lead to a draw. This game is fizzling out. Wow.
Yeah. Good news for Magnus then. He will have the white pieces in game 3, and basically if he wins that game, he's going to already be ready for the semi-finals. Liem, he needs to win a game here to take it to tie breaks, and after this one, only 2 more rapid games to go.
Opposite colour bishops, Simon. Pawn structure basically symmetrical. Could it get any more drawish?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like, you know, they're playing these brilliant moves on the side now, but it doesn't make any difference pushing Harry here. It's a dead draw. And, you know, unless you make a big blunder here, you know, they're shake hands or click mouses very soon.
Virtually shake hands.
Yeah, virtually shake hands.
Click mouses, I like that.
Yeah.
What was it that Jan Nepomniachtchi tweeted on the first day?
Warriors of the mouse.
Warriors
assemble.
of the mouse. Oh, I like that one. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and now Magnus is really just offering that handshake, and now the rooks are going to come off. And now it's just going to be a case of those opposite-coloured bishops, just like someone getting divorced.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Ships passing in the night.
Ships passing in the night. I like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
They can never connect.
Oh.
You know, we're going to have another poem come in and by someone soon, aren't we? With that.
Yeah.
There you go. Someone write a poem about the opposite-coloured bishops.
Yeah, we do love that.
Or a selfie with a
With
picture of opposite-coloured bishops.
Do that.
And
yeah.
we'll feature it on the show.
Yeah.
Or with your divorced wife, if you want to. If you can arrange that.
Asking for trouble. But
Yeah.
meanwhile, we're about to see the draw agreed. Nothing to be done. It's a blockade for both sides. And there we go. The position repeats itself. It's a draw.
All right, Magnus still up by 1 point after 2 games here in this quarterfinal match.